Story 1. The voice that came from the locked office. This happened to me in 2017. At the time, I worked nights as a records clerk in an outpatient mental health facility on the edge of the city. It wasn't a hospital, not technically, more like an administrative satellite site. Half the offices were unused most nights, and the waiting room lights were always dimmed after 6. I worked the 3:30 p.m. to midnight shift, Monday through Friday, alone after the janitorial crew left. I'd been there for almost 3 years, and I knew every creak, buzz, and hum that came with that building. The way the motion sensor lights in the hallways sometimes glitched, the way the AC clicked twice before starting, even the exact time the heater in the waiting room hissed alive. The only room I had no reason to enter was room 2E, the old intake office at the end of the East Corridor. That wing hadn't been used for months. The door to 2E stayed locked. The blinds inside were always drawn shut. I passed it every night around 10:45 on my final walkthrough to make sure everything was secured. I never gave it much thought until I started hearing the whispering. At first, I dismissed it. The vents carried sound strangely, and the heating system always made these soft clicking noises. But this was different. One night, as I passed 2E, I thought I heard someone muttering behind the door. It wasn't words, more like a breathy rhythm, like someone trying to talk through a dream. I paused and leaned in slightly. It stopped. The next night, I passed by again, slower this time. Same sound, almost like syllables straining to come through something thick. Again, it stopped as soon as I focused. I stood there for a full minute. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The air had that dry, recycled hospital quality. I moved on, but I found myself watching the gap beneath the door from then on, just in case. Over the next week, it happened more frequently, but never consistently. Some nights, just silence. Others, that same faint vocal flutter, always behind the locked door of 2E. I told myself it was pipes, or maybe sound from the parking lot echoing weirdly. Then came the night it changed. It was a Thursday. I remember because I was exhausted and counting down to the weekend. I did my usual sweep. The hallway was colder than usual. I walked past 2E. No whisper. No sound at all. Instead, there was breathing. Steady. Slow. Deep. Not a gasp. Not an old building creak that resembled breath. This was unmistakable. Someone was breathing just inches from the door, directly on the other side. I froze. I didn't want to believe it at first, but as I stood there, not moving, I realized my own breathing had synced with it out of instinct. That's how clearly I could hear it. And then it stopped. Not like it faded. It just ceased mid-inhale. I backed away, very slowly. I didn't turn my back until I hit the main lobby light switch. Every part of me wanted to open the door, prove to myself there was nothing there. But I didn't. I just went back to my desk and waited out the rest of my shift, pretending to answer emails. That night, I didn't sleep. 2 weeks passed without incident. I even told myself it had been stress, a misheard sound and nothing more. I didn't hear anything unusual again, and I stopped walking down the East Corridor altogether. I convinced myself that was progress. Then came the envelope. It was around 8:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. A courier dropped off a batch of new patient forms. Nothing strange about that. It happened twice a week. I opened the envelope absent-mindedly while eating at my desk. There were about 24 intake forms, most half-filled. Between the last two, something slipped out. A carbon sheet. One of those blue-black duplicate sheets you barely see anymore. I picked it up carefully. There was handwriting on it. At first I thought it was someone's form, but it wasn't written like one. It was loose, casual, no headers or fields, just a list of words. Hallway light burned out, she's here again, breathing louder tonight. I don't think she sees me under that in smaller writing. Name Elissa Bracknell Clark, 3:30 p.m. 12 m. That's my name. And I don't write like that. I stared at the paper for a long time. It didn't make sense. I flipped through the rest of the forms, nothing else out of place. I even checked the envelope again. There was no sender name, no internal routing stamp, just a seal and my department. I didn't tell anyone. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid it would sound like I was making it up, or maybe I was afraid someone had sent it and wanted me to find it. That possibility felt worse. That night, when I passed room 2E, I stopped, not out of habit, but to look. I checked the handle, still locked. But the air smelled different, stale, almost metallic, and colder, like someone had opened a freezer. I walked away. That same envelope reappeared again on Friday, same courier, same forms, same carbon copy. But this time, there was just one phrase on it, written in uneven, downward-sloping print. She knows now. By early December, I couldn't keep working full shifts. I started leaving early. Nothing official. I'd finish the important parts of my tasks and clock out around 11, sometimes earlier. No one ever questioned it. The place was always empty by then. But something had changed in how the building sounded. It wasn't just quiet. It was patterned, like a rhythm. I began noticing it around 9 p.m., the soft drag of a chair leg, a faint beep, the rustle of paper, always in the same order, always spaced the same. One night I timed it, 27 minutes apart, every time. At first I thought maybe it was an old auto system, leftover security code or printer loop, but the timing was too human, too deliberate. Once, I hid near the break room where I thought it came from, just waited. It happened exactly at 9:27, but there was no one there. I walked toward the sound. Nothing. I thought I saw a light flicker behind the glass panel of 2E, but that door had no power source, no computer. The wing had been disconnected from the main grid months ago. I started documenting things, just little notes, timestamps, sounds, temperature changes, until one night the envelope came again. But this time it wasn't from a courier. It was waiting on my desk when I arrived. No name, no stamp, just my name in pencil on the flap. I opened it. Inside, a typed form, one I'd never seen before. It was a resignation letter. My name was printed on it. My signature was already filled in. I stared at it for a long time. The date listed was that day. At the bottom, a line was scrawled in ink. You were always supposed to leave tonight. I took my coat and walked out. I never went back. To this day, I don't know what that office was, or who kept leaving those notes. I looked up Elissa Bracknell once, my own name, just to check. There was a mention in an archived staff directory, but the dates didn't match. She worked there in 1997, 20 years before I ever set foot in that building. Story 2. The man who watched me sweep the same spot every night. This happened to me in 2018. At the time, I was working overnight custodial at a mid-sized technical college in Indiana. It was mostly empty during my shift, except for the occasional security guard making rounds. I'd start at 9 p.m. and finish around 5:30 in the morning, covering 3 buildings: admin, health sciences, and the library wing. The work was monotonous. Vacuuming, mopping, trash collection. I preferred it that way. I followed the same routine every night. Same order, same pace. The admin building first, then the library, then the health wing last, because it was the most clinical. Cold, white tiles and labs filled with mannequins and anatomy charts. I always hated it, but I got used to the silence. There was one hallway I had to mop twice every night. The floor plan had changed recently, some kind of failed renovation, and the east corridor now looped into itself. It meant I'd sometimes lose track of where I was, circling back and passing the same door more than once. The spot in question was a seam in the tile near an old electrical closet. Every time I swept there, the light above buzzed faintly and dimmed for half a second. I barely noticed it at first. Maybe the second or third week in, I remember glancing up mid-sweep because the light above me flickered. Not enough to go dark, just enough to change the tone of the room for a second. I thought it was nothing. Buildings that old always had minor electrical issues, but I began noticing it happened only when I reached that exact spot, right above the seam. It started becoming part of my rhythm. Mop left, mop right. Pause, flicker, continue. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Then I started seeing him. It was subtle at first. A figure outside the door glass, the kind of vertical pane with wire mesh embedded in it, just a shape, upright, centered, motionless. The first time, I figured it was the security guard. I even waved, but when I went to check the hallway, no one was there. I didn't panic. I figured he'd turned the corner or gone into one of the side offices. But over the next few nights, the same thing kept happening, always the same moment. When I passed the electrical closet, the light would flicker. I'd glance at the door, and he'd be standing there, same distance, same posture, no movement. The second time, I walked out fast, turned left and right. The hallway was empty. Even the motion sensor lights were off, meaning no one had walked through. After that, I started pretending I didn't see him. I convinced myself I was tired, that it was a reflection or just my brain layering shadows into shapes. It didn't make sense to be afraid. It was too absurd. But fear doesn't care about sense. It cares about silence. That's what started to change. The feeling that I wasn't just seeing something, but that it was choosing not to act, not to move, not to speak. That stillness began to feel deliberate, and eventually, worse than action. I stopped mopping that hallway. I made up an excuse to switch routes, but even when I avoided the area, I'd still catch the flicker of that light through the window across the quad. Always at the same time. Always when I should have been standing there. One night I snapped and walked straight down the east corridor, slamming my mop against the door of the electrical closet. I even shouted something like, "Okay, I see you." Nothing. No response. But when I turned to leave, I saw it. Pressed against the wire mesh glass of the lab next door, a pale hand. The fingers were too long. The palm smudged against the surface like it had been waiting there, still and warm. I backed away slowly. I didn't sweep that building for the rest of the week. By early April, I decided I needed proof. Not because I thought anyone would believe me, but because I needed to believe I wasn't imagining it. I downloaded a light meter app on my phone. It was meant for photographers, but it worked well enough. I brought it with me the next time I did my shift in the health sciences building. I waited until just after 3 a.m., when I knew I'd normally reach the flicker spot. I set the phone up on the mop cart and pressed record. The meter fluctuated slightly as I walked as expected, but when I hit the seam in the tile near the electrical closet, the lux value dropped sharply for 0.6 seconds, then spiked again. I reviewed it 3 times, always the same interval, 0.6 seconds. It didn't sound like much, but in real time, 0.6 seconds is just long enough to miss something moving, or turning, or hiding. That thought lodged in my chest like a needle. What if the flicker wasn't random? What if it was timed, conditioned? I began recording video as I worked, short clips with my phone angled discreetly toward the hallway glass. That's when I saw him again, not in person, but on playback. He never moved, just stood there as still as ever, but his position had shifted. He was closer to the glass now, closer than before, closer than he'd ever been. I watched the footage dozens of times. The resolution was poor, but the shape was unmistakable. Tall, upright, bare arms, no shoes. The frame flickered for exactly 0.6 seconds, and when it recovered, the figure was gone. But the frame before the flicker, I could swear he was turning. Not fast, just slightly, like someone reacting to their name. I sent the clip to myself and deleted it from my work phone. I didn't want it sitting on any shared device. That night, I got a call around 4:15 a.m. Unknown number. I let it ring. No voicemail. When I checked the call log, the number was blank. Just the timestamp. 4:15 a.m. The exact minute the light had flickered on camera. I started developing strange habits, walking slower in open areas, moving only when the motion sensors activated, standing deliberately under brighter lights. At first, I thought I was being cautious, but over time, it felt more like I was being watched and had begun performing for whoever or whatever, was watching. I stopped using headphones. I kept my phone in my breast pocket, camera angled out. I started sweeping with my back to the walls, making sure I never passed a door without glancing at the bottom, checking for shadows, reflections, movement. All of it started feeling rehearsed, like I was acting safe to keep the watcher passive. And maybe that worked, until the last night. It was a Friday, in late spring. The semester had ended. The campus was practically empty. I told myself I'd do a full loop for once, just to prove to myself I wasn't afraid anymore. I started with the library, then the admin offices, then the health wing. The air felt thick as I entered the east corridor. Dust floated visibly in the fluorescence. The lights buzzed as usual, until I reached the electrical closet. No flicker. I paused and looked up. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the stairwell door to the third floor. It was ajar. That door had been sealed shut for months. A broken security latch meant it was only accessible from above. No one used the third floor. It had been slated for demolition the year before. I walked toward it slowly. The gap widened as I neared. The fluorescent behind me finally flickered, late, off pattern, and didn't recover for a full second. Inside the stairwell, the air was dry. The steps creaked slightly as I ascended. At the landing, I saw it. Footprints, 2 sets, barefoot, pressed into a thin layer of construction dust. One pair led into the stairwell from above. The other led back down, right to where I was standing. I stepped back instinctively and the stairwell light went out. No sound, just silence. I backed away slowly, never turning, until I reached the corridor again. The fluorescents returned to their usual glow. The air felt warmer, heavier. When I got to the janitor's closet, my cart was gone. I left the building and never returned. I called the supervisor that night and quit. I didn't give a reason. Weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. No sender, no return address, just my name. Inside, a single piece of paper typed. We appreciated the performance. No signature, no stamp, just that. I never worked alone again. Story 3. The camera showed me standing still, but I don't remember stopping. This happened to me in the winter of 2022. I worked nights as an overnight stocker at a small 24-hour grocery chain just outside of Cincinnati. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet. I liked having no customers around, just me, the radio, and shelves to organize. Our security cameras recorded continuously. Not that anyone really watched them, unless something got stolen, but we had access to the feeds through the back office. Grainy footage on a 10-screen panel, divided by zone, produce, dry goods, freezer, checkout, stockroom, and the rest. My job was simple. Refill pallets, tidy the aisles, reface shelves. The kind of work that lets your mind go blank. I preferred it that way. Nights felt short, predictable. Until the morning my manager asked if I had been feeling all right lately. I said yes, and she nodded, then paused. She asked if I'd taken a break around 3:40 a.m. the night before. I said no. We weren't allowed breaks that late. She pulled up the footage. It was me, standing in aisle 7, motionless. I don't mean just standing. I mean not blinking, no weight shift, no breathing movement, nothing. I stood with one hand on a cereal box, the other by my side, eyes open, fixed. She clicked the timestamp. 3 minutes, then 4, then 7, still motionless. I told her I didn't remember that at all, not standing there, not stopping. She said, maybe I was tired, or maybe the camera had frozen, but the time code was counting, and other areas in the frame showed slight changes, a shift in lighting, a fly drifting past the top shelf, the subtle oscillation of a ceiling fan. Only I wasn't moving. I told her I didn't want to watch anymore. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Later that night during my shift, I stood in aisle 7, trying to recreate the posture. My feet were slightly apart, one hand hovering near the top shelf. I tried standing still for just 60 seconds. It was impossible. My legs twitched, my balance shifted, my breath made my chest rise and fall. I couldn't match what the footage showed. There was no stillness like that in my body, not even asleep. That week, I started dreaming about it. Seeing myself on the security monitor, except I wasn't alone in the frame. Something was standing just out of view. I could feel it, not see it, like it was just behind the lens, watching me watch myself. I woke up with the taste of static in my mouth, that copper bitter dryness. I tried to forget, told myself it was exhaustion, but the next shift, it happened again. This time, I caught it live. I was restocking chips in aisle 5 when I happened to glance up at the dome camera above me. I saw myself, standing, still, hand frozen mid-air. But I wasn't still. I was watching myself stand still. I didn't say anything after the second time. What could I even say? I convinced myself it was a glitch. Maybe the system had a buffer lag. Maybe the dome camera was playing an older frame on a loop. But part of me knew that wasn't it, because I remembered where I had been. I thought I'd been moving. But when I checked the logs after my shift, the system confirmed what I feared. From 2:17 to 2:23 a.m., footage showed me standing completely still near the end cap freezer. Different aisle, same posture, same lack of movement. Even worse, when I looked at the footage, the hand I thought I'd been holding a box with wasn't holding anything. It just hovered, as if mimicking the idea of holding, and my eyes, they were open, fixed again. 6 minutes this time. I left early that night, said I felt sick. I didn't sleep. The following shift, I brought my phone into the aisle and tried to record the feed from the dome camera myself, just to compare. I'd glance up at the lens, then down at my phone screen, trying to catch the exact moment anything changed. Nothing did, until 3:03 a.m. I blinked, but in the feed, I didn't. It was just one frame, but it didn't match. I reviewed it dozens of times. In real time, I'd blinked, but the version of me on the camera stayed open-eyed, frozen. I started to lose track of when I was acting and when I was reacting. I began to question everything, the sound of my footsteps, the weight of boxes in my arms, even my voice when I hummed along with the overnight radio. I didn't know if it was mine anymore. The next morning, I found a note taped to the office monitor. Not from my manager, not from anyone on staff, just a slip of receipt paper with sharp-angled handwriting. Try watching what happens when you leave the frame. I checked. I rewound the footage to the exact minute I walked past the seafood case and disappeared off screen. And there it was. Less than 3 seconds after I left the frame, I walked back in. Same outfit, same angle, but I never turned around. The second version of me entered from the same side I had exited, paused, and looked directly into the camera, then walked backward, out of frame. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. I started researching things I couldn't even explain out loud. Terms like autoscopic hallucination, tonic immobility, dissociative microstates, all of them described pieces, slivers of the experience, but none of them fit exactly. What I felt wasn't panic, it was detachment. I'd catch myself zoning out and not remember blinking, or not remember picking something up, only to find it already stacked on the shelf. Sometimes I'd feel like I was watching myself from just behind my eyes, like I was walking slightly outside my own body. They call it mirror freeze in some clinical contexts, when the mind severs itself to avoid perceiving the full weight of a trauma. But I wasn't in danger. I wasn't afraid. I was blank. That was worse. The final footage came 3 nights later. I didn't discover it. My manager did. She asked me into the office at the end of my shift. Her expression was unreadable. No smile, no concern. Just a kind of still caution. She said someone had flagged a behavioral anomaly from the corporate camera review, a system that auto-scans for suspicious motion or loitering. She pulled up the clip. It was me, standing in aisle 3, facing the camera. At first, it looked like I was adjusting the shelf, but I wasn't touching anything. I was just still. Then I turned. Not quickly, just gradually. One shoulder, then my head. The movement was unnatural. like my joints were resisting it. And then I smiled, wide, teeth visible. It wasn't a twitch or a reflex, it was full. I don't remember doing that. I don't remember being in aisle 3 at all that night, but the timestamp matched my scan log. The clip was 11 minutes long. For the final 40 seconds, I didn't move at all. I just smiled, staring into the camera. My manager didn't say anything. She just closed the file and told me to take the rest of the week off. Said I looked tired. I didn't argue. That night, I left through the stockroom exit. As I walked past the backlot, the dome camera above the exit blinked. I paused. Its red LED flickered once, then off. In the faint reflection on the glass door, I saw myself, standing just behind me, still, watching, smiling.